Hello everybody and welcome to a video that I am very excited to be recording. I am currently having a chat with Dr. Jack Science, the designer of the custom campaign Call of the Plaguebearer, which is one that I've played and actually have a review for on the channel. It has some spoiler-free and some spoilers that you can find down in the description of this video. But Dr. Jack Science, I'll let you introduce yourself. You had such a great one before, and you also had a different name that you called yourself in that. So I'll just throw this to you if you want to say hi to everyone watching on YouTube.
Hi there, I am Dr. Jack Science on certain Discords, tend to go by Walker of Tales on a bunch of other things, and I am the designer of Call of the Plaguebearer.
Nice. So if you're a first-time viewer watching this, I did a previous one of these with Axolotl, the designer of Dark Matter, and it's going to be very similar for this. I'm going to just say right off the bat, Call of the Plaguebearer, I really like this custom campaign. It's only Dark Matter in this one that I've played twice, and there's a lot of really great scenarios in this campaign that have stuck with me. So that's partly the reason why I wanted to do this interview, but also because you've designed an entire custom campaign. That is so much work, and it's an accomplishment all of itself, but to also make one that I think is really cool and explores such interesting design that I'm going to talk about as we get going. It's just really awesome. Like, it's just like I can't even fathom it. I started and then I quit. I want to start by asking you, where did this idea all come from for making this custom campaign? Not even the story, but like, why? How did you start this? Making 8 scenarios.
So, first of all, thanks. That's a lot of high praise, and I appreciate it. In terms of your question, so way back when, the various groups I play Arkham with had always sort of like, discussed like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there was a scenario that did this? Wouldn't it be awesome if there was like something with this? And after a certain point, I had looked at custom content before, but then I played Dark Matter and Alice in Wonderland and went, okay, if I want a campaign that does X, Y, and Z, I just have to make the campaign that does X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And so those two were a huge inspiration in terms of like seeing what could be done. But something that I try to do a lot with my design is exist in the boundaries of what the official campaigns can't necessarily touch, or at least haven't decided to touch, because you never know what Maxine is going to throw at us next. But suffice to say, that's part of why some of the scenarios in this campaign stand out so much. So a lot of it was, if I ever want a scenario with XYZ mechanic, I should just make it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Nice. So then the theme of this is it's a really cool theme, and I like it because it scales up and tells the story in such an interesting way. Before everyone who's watching on YouTube, there's gonna be spoilers throughout this entire thing. So if you want to play this campaign, and I highly recommend you do, maybe go away here. Even though as much as it is hard for me to tell someone to leave a video, it is probably the right choice to avoid spoilers. But just like the first among many scales throughout this whole thing, the campaign and the story also scales in 2 ways. I want to touch on this briefly, but I want to get back to like how the theme and the story came to you. But my favorite aspect of this campaign that didn't click with me until my rerun of it, but how it's basically 2 stories in a way, like not in terms of like actual story, but like in terms of like a design story. So in scenarios 1, 3, 5, and 7, you are somewhere else, and then in scenarios 2, 4, 6, and 8, you're on like the exact same Arkham map, which is really cool. And when I realized that on my rerun, I was like, this is really neat, and it has such a good pace that comes from it, because they each are like it's like it could work even as a Dream Eater style thing, right? Like you could play
Yeah.
4A and 4B, like right, like that, right?
You could treat it as, I don't know, are we good with spoilers
Oh yeah, go
here?
for it.
Yeah. You could treat it as 1, 3, 5, and 7 being the story of the Taylors, Herbert West, and
Yep.
the First Among Many, and the even scenarios being the story of not Alchem, Arkham and Balshindor.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it gives it such an interesting pace as you're playing it too, because it's not like where you're like doing the same thing where you're like exploring this location over and over and over again. It breaks it up, so you get the pace where it's like, here's Arkham. Let's step away from Arkham, back to it, which is really cool. So with this in mind, the two sides of the story, as you say, like Arkham and Balshindor, and then the Taylors. Where did this all come from? Where was your inspiration for the story for this campaign?
So the first guide stone was that. So way back in the core campaign, there's this moment where at the end of the first scenario, you're given the choice to either burn down your house or leave it standing. This hell pit is my home. And based on that choice, you either have that location on the map of Arkham or you don't. And that's something that they've never truly gone back to all that much. Like, there's been levels of it in the campaigns, but I had, for the longest time, this idea in my head of, like, I want a campaign where it's like the same map, but every time you visit it, what you did changes the map fundamentally. Like, the next time you're there, this place is burned to the ground, or this place is overgrown with vines or something or whatever. And that was why when I sat down to make something, it had to be a campaign and not just a scenario.
Yeah, that makes total
Because
sense. Yeah.
the core grasp of it for me was that it was something that evolved over multiple sessions. The next things that came into play were the twin sort of influences of the two primary pieces of media that inspired this. The first one being, obviously, Resident Evil, specifically the first 3 Resident Evils.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't play this campaign and not go, hey, that feels Resident Evil-y. Like,
Yeah.
it's just not, like, if you have touched any of those games, you will notice certain things. With that, I love those games. They're great. They're awful in a number of ways, but they're absolutely great. And I don't trust myself to adapt material. I think adapting something is really, really tricky. But using something as an influence, doing a lot of like callbacks and comparisons to important ideas from those games was a lot more reasonable to me. That's why you fight the first among many and not Mr. X or William Birkin.
And
You're fighting.
and to go on what you're saying on that too, and then it allows you to also kind of like take the influence and make your own story with it and kind of turn it on its head in some ways too, right? So it's even more interesting for you as a creator. I get you. I'm the exact same way with that kind of thing. Influence is more fun than adaptation, yeah.
Exactly. I didn't want to make, like Predator or The Thing in art. It just, in the mechanics of Arkham, I wanted to take the influences of Resident Evil and slide them into Arkham levels.
Yeah, yeah.
The second one is one that some people are like immediately get, and some people who haven't touched it the same way I have. And that is Arkham, the board game, 2nd edition.
Yeah.
Which I devoured as a teenager.
Same here. It was my first. It was like my first board game I actually ever bought for myself, Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. So, I'm there with you.
I play. Then we're on good ground there because it's a game that has not necessarily aged gracefully in a lot of ways, but it's still, even comparative to Arkham 3rd Edition, I don't think there's anything quite like Arkham 2nd Edition. It's got a lot of old style, well, that's absolute bullshit game
Yeah.
design, but it's still sort of, there's a lot of really cool stuff there.
Oh
And
yeah.
so a lot of things in the Arkham levels are love letters to second edition, especially the locations, the stuff they reference, the characters at those locations. All of the characters at those locations are taken from the text on cards, except for Hibbert. I had to kind of do some modifications because I believe in the board game they barely reference him and he's like an old man.
Yeah.
And I was like, that doesn't really work for the story I'm trying to tell.
I'll let you know
There,
that your Hibbs is now the Hibbs I picture in my head. For any sort of references to Hibbs now, I think of the Hibbs from Call of the Plaguebearer.
well, it's just it feels so natural to have this sort of like schlubby barman who's like intimidating physically,
Yeah.
but an absolute like teddy bear of a person
Yeah, yeah.
running this rough and tumble speakeasy.
And that's why I need to make sure I save him every time when the miasma's coming through. Because, like, he's a priority. Everyone else, I can make it work, right? But I need
Yep.
me to save Hibbs.
You're in good company.
Yeah.
The homebrew play along is happening right now, so I can like look up the exact numbers of a sample size of players. 90% of players save hits.
Yeah. Yeah.
90% of players rally hibs.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've done that in both of my playthroughs. So, when you were designing this, because there's these two sides, the inspiration, what made you, like, was that kind of just, like, by the nature of the inspirations? Like, how the fact that the Arkham side was inspired by the board game, is that what made it kind of fit into two styles of scenarios between them? Is there, like, or, like, when did that come in the design process?
So that came in the design process about the time I was testing scenario 5, which was originally going to be the afternoon war,
Okay.
and I realized this functionally does not work if you play an Arkham level back to back with another Arkham level.
Okay.
It was that point where I'm like, solidly it needs to be split into these two sort of like odds and evens halves, where it's really cool to see this map evolve, but if you are on it for two scenarios in a row, it gets old.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That makes sense. That makes sense.
But in terms of when those references started falling into place, I couldn't give you an exact time because they had been there the entire time I was sort of theory crafting.
Okay, yeah.
By the time I actually started working on the campaign, I knew I was going to be referencing a lot of Resident Evil and a lot of Arkham Second Edition. Those were both like baked in. The third reference that came a little later was Reanimator.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's interesting to know because yeah, that I liked that bit when he showed up in like, because like there's something you can tell there's something funky going on, and you get like even like the glimpses of it in kind of like the intro when you know like the lore of it. You're like, this kind of reads like a little bit like Reanimator, even if you didn't know Resident Evil. There's that like feeling to it. And then when he shows up in the third scenario, I really enjoyed that addition to it. So that's cool to know that actually came in later in the process.
So part of that was me thinking over the like, okay, I'm referencing Resident Evil a bunch. How do you mix Resident Evil and Lovecraftian stuff? Well, I mean, there's a scientist who works with the undead straight up in Lovecraftian canon.
Yeah.
So that seems like a reasonable thing to pull in.
Yeah, it's like one of those things. Like
And-
it's like I think it's already kind of exists for me. That's a slam dunk right
Exactly.
there. Yeah.
And you can just see Herbert West as an Umbrella Corps,
Oh yeah.
an
100%.
Umbrella Corporation stooge. Like he would obviously he works for the Taylors in this story the same way he would work for them in that. They offer him a little money and a place to do his research, and yeah, he would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, definitely.
The guy is a tool.
Yeah, and it's true. It's true. One of those things too. That's in your personification of him and your translation of him into the story text was really good. because it's exactly as you said. He's kind of a tool. Yeah.
I love Herbert West as a character. There's a long thing in the literary canon of mad scientists who are like they're these absolute like doing the worst thing madmen, but they have a presence to them. Starting back with like Dr. Frankenstein, leading through like the Invisible Man, and then you get to Lovecraftian stuff, and you get Herbert West, where it's in that literary canon of like, oh my god, you are making the worst possible decisions in the name of science, which is actually in the name of your own ambition. But you're a really interesting person, so we're gonna watch you anyways.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I think Jeffrey Combs's West is like in the Reanimator movie is the one people think of for a reason because he nails that in that performance. And I very much, whenever I wrote West's dialogue, I was just having Jeffrey Combs read it in my head.
Yeah, just channeling that. Yeah, definitely.
That sort of dry sarcasm that drips off every line.
Yeah, for sure. It's wonderful. And then it's just cool to see like this is something to talk about too once we get the scenario cards out, but like the tenuous allies mechanic I think is really cool because like with the Circle Undone, you can sometimes miss aspects of the story, right? Just by the way resolutions go. But in this one, like you're going to be working with them in some form through that mechanic, which I thought was really nice. I like that the first time it showed up and the second time too, when I actually used the tenuous allies, was really, it just feels really good too.
Yeah, it's honestly a shame that it shows up like 3 times in the campaign, and I wish it had an excuse to show up more.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that's like, it almost feels like it could be an evergreen mechanic.
Yeah, definitely.
But for the fact that it's a custom campaign mechanic.
Yes, yeah. For when you designed this is something that when I learned when I was talking to Axel about Dark Matter, the order that it was designed surprised me because I didn't even know there was like a mini campaign at first. With this one, was there because you said there was a lot of like pre-planning as you like were like putting pieces together. Was it planned from like 1 to 8? Because I know there you said there was the afternoon war. That's when you realized there was a stopping point between. What was the order for how these scenarios were designed?
So they were designed effectively in order.
Yeah.
Except High Noon Descent and Afternoon War were kind of simultaneous designed.
Yeah.
Because I started testing Afternoon War and I'm like, nope, need to put this before. Swapped them. Originally, the whole idea with Afternoon War was that the events of Morning Chorus, when things go bad, it immediately leads to Afternoon War. But, switched.
Yeah.
But in terms of how the order these were designed in,
yeah,
I knew the core idea and mechanic of each scenario before I started designing basically any of them.
That's cool.
But pen to paper, actual like, okay, here's the locations, here's what the encounter cards for this set do, etc., etc. I designed a couple of the core encounter cards first, and then went in order: Late Risers, Night on the Town, Dead by Dawn, etc., etc., etc.
Cool.
Over the span of about a year.
Cool. This is a question that I'm curious. I never asked Axolotl this, but I'm curious to see now. How many times do you think you've played this campaign?
Front to back, or just counting all the levels?
Let's just go counting all the levels, because this is also like the perspective for someone who wants to design a campaign to know how much like time and effort goes into it. Because I imagine the numbers aren't low.
Yeah, I would expect that scenarios that worked from design 1, probably at least 30 to 40 playtests.
That sounds about right.
Scenarios that didn't.
A good deal.
Oh boy!
Yeah. On that's actually a great segue. What were the ones that worked from first design? Like, what were the ones that were most complete that you found on your first playthrough of them?
Dead by Dawn, High Noon Descent, and The Midnight Hour were all the ones that were like, this is what it's trying to do.
Nice.
I know what it's trying to do. I know how this works. This works. Afternoon War only took one round of back to the drawing board full revisions.
Nice, yeah.
The remainder had some complications, had some stuff, had some bits where I had to get the mechanics right. Mm-hmm. And this MFer,
that was the hardest.
This one took so long to get right.
I'll just say I think that one that's actually kind of was actually kind of shocking to me, but I suppose it makes sense. There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's basically also I think that one's really good. It's you can feel the I was gonna say love, but you called it an MFer, so we'll say work that went into it.
I love Night on the Town.
Yeah.
The reason it has so much work into it is that it was a darling I was unwilling to kill.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's actually so. For people who don't know, this is something that comes in creative, anything creative. I'm a writer and I'm a filmmaker, and a thing that you have to do is the phrase "kill your darling." Sometimes you have to kill the things that you love, and it's really hard to do sometimes. So, what was the darling in that one that held on to for so long?
Just the combination of mechanics of this sort of pandemic, what's the word? Clutches of Chaos style, stuff's ticking up around the map, combined with here's a bunch of things that you don't test. Here's a bunch of things that aren't normal things to test.
Yeah.
Because early on I struck on the idea of the various locations caring about things that were general good things to do in Arkham.
Yeah. And
then I caught on the idea of Defend and was like, okay, let's figure out how to make this work. And Night on the Town was where I was figuring out a combination of figuring out how Defend would work, figuring out how the scenario itself would work, and also the fact that it is the one that has the largest influence on the rest of the campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Night on the Town is where you find out what version of Call of the Plaguebearer you're playing.
Mm-hmm. That's actually that's very fair too. Now that hearing that, it makes total sense why this one needed all that work, because it is very important to Morning Chorus, Afternoon War, right? Yeah.
It was crucial that Night on the Town, a reasonable group would be able to manage about 4 locations saved, maybe 5, and if they got 6, that's great.
Yes.
But if a group was only managing 3 or 2, then throws the whole campaign into uncertainty.
Yes, yeah.
And so it was crucial because it needs to be an interesting scenario. It can't just be a gimme. But it also needs to walk that tight where it had so many things that needed to be figured out.
Yes. I think that it's in I'm a broken record here for people watching, but I think it accomplishes those goals perfectly. It's the perfect level, and actually I'm gonna just load it out on the board. We're gonna talk about it more when we get there, but it has a big Midnight Masks feel to it, so much to the point where I remember my first time playing, I was I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a monster on the other side here, right? An enemy. And it came. So,
That was intentional.
That was intentional, yeah. Was it a midnight, that was the kind of the framework for it? Did you use that a lot in the design?
I specifically, so originally, there wasn't going to be a boss.
Yeah.
But in like an early playtest, I forget if I realized or one of my playtesters commented that it's like, hey, this is the second level and you're in Arkham.
Yeah.
And you're like walking around looking for people in Arkham as the second level of your campaign. The agenda should have a boss on the back.
Yeah, it's that was a because it just feels like it should. It just feels like it should. Yeah. So for people who might need a refresher of why this is so important, you can definitely correct me if I get anything if I get anything wrong here. But basically, you're trying to like defend these locations, and when you do, they're the locations that don't become. I want in like the shortest form, like corrupted as the campaign goes on. So then corrupted locations are bad, and they're gonna you're gonna have impacts for them through Morning Chorus, Afternoon War, and then also in Midnight Hours does there lasting effects there as well from these how this one plays out?
Assuming anyone who is listening to this has already played the campaign, the ones you let get corrupted start as the
yes,
part
that's
of the
what it
Bastion
is.
War.
Yes, yeah.
And the ones that you rally are incapable of being corrupted by Balshindor.
So one thing, we'll jump ahead because I think going with the point. We're going to talk about this one first because there's just a lot of points that I want to talk about here. And the thing on like when I was talking with Axolotl, he said that he designed for the first play, but like Call of the Plaguebearer, he loved it so much because it was designed for the replay, and it's very true. This campaign is incredibly replayable because of this scenario and then everything that cascades from it. It's kind of wild. So like the lasting effects, what was the process for figuring out what the lasting effects from scenario 2, scenario 4, etc., etc.? Like how did you go about organizing all those ideas coherently? Because to me, I look at it and I'm like, how does this even happen?
So I started with a overall idea, a beginning point, and an end point. And what I mean by that is, the overall idea was the first thing, the guiding light of, I want a campaign where the locations on the map reflect your decisions in the campaign. Where, because you did this in scenario 2, in scenario 5, this happens. Or what ended up happening, because you did this in even scenario blank, this happens in even scenario blank. There are effects that can, but regardless. I knew the starting point had to be the city of Arkham.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I wanted to do with the campaign was every campaign, even Circle Undone, does not stay in Arkham.
Yeah.
Even the Circle Undone, in the final scenario, you're in an extra dimensional location. You're before the Black Throne, which is super cool. But we've got this really rich city setting, and I kind of wanted the ultimate climax to be amongst the city.
Yeah.
And that was tied to one of the other ideas that was like, we haven't seen this in the game, and I really want to see this. I knew it had to end with the locations themselves are the monster. The Ancient One is made of the locations that you made bad decisions about as the campaign went along.
Yeah. So,
and from that's where I used those two guideposts to kind of work my way inward from the two of them.
Nice. Yeah. One thing I love is that first off, like I think that a part of the design that I think is actually kind of tricky for people to actually like they'll overlook, but the movement in Arkham is really nice. Your map connections are just really good. So I just like that's just a huge props to that one for this, because I can imagine that like there did a lot of work going into doing the connections, or was that just kind of like, was that like a trial and error through playtesting? Because the map feels very intuitive and very fair for the movement as well.
So I am lucky in that my favorite investigator is Finn Edwards.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so I have a bit of a like I already had experience looking at maps and going, okay, I can evade there, I can like do cheat moves over to there, I can evade, like figuring out the ways maps cycle, combined with the fact that I'm a programmer in my day to day, and like drawing out graphs is pretty can be somewhat akin to making maps.
Yeah, yeah.
So the overall shape of Arkham actually was arrived at probably only like 2 or 3 revisions into Night on the Town.
Nice, nice.
It's just friendly enough with its connections,
Yes.
while not being like, go wherever you want.
Yes, yeah, no, and exactly, right? Like, you can build a plan to get from somewhere to somewhere, but it, like, because, like, to get to Orne Library to the bottom, it's not just like, hey, you can go just down across for one. You do have to move down, like this, but that option still presents itself to you, which makes it very easy to figure things out. And then also, like, if you get additional movement in your deck because you're a good Arkham player, it becomes even easier to take control of the situation, right?
Yeah, so one of the mechanical ideas I wanted to work on when I was working with this campaign, was movement matters and the encounter deck plays with that.
Okay, yeah.
Which, if you look at the Rotting Remains Grasping Hands combo of the campaign that shows up again and again, they are Rotting Remains and Grasping Hands, but movement matters.
Yes, yeah, because they can move you towards miasma locations, right? Am I remembering that correct? Yeah.
Towards miasma and away from stable.
Yes, yeah. Which can put you in a pretty big pickle. One thing I remember distinctly, so I think that, like, obviously you do something different than Dark Matter, where you actually use cards that exist already in the actual official game, just with different art, which I think is a great touch, and I love that, and it's something that I am going to be doing because of this, because I think it's just so elegant to put into my designs as well, because it's just, the card's good, and if you flavor it with art towards your thing, that's also pretty sweet. And then also, like, making your own designs, like your own Rotting Remains, Grasping Hands in the flavor. And I think it's like a good balance. But because in my first playthrough, I played my scenario before this, I played Dark Matter in an older version where even Axolotl admits that the Treachery deck was a little bit too crazy.
I've played that version. Yeah.
Your Treachery design, I think it's one of the most balanced I've played in terms of a custom campaign. I think that the whole deck just hits really nice, and it doesn't focus you down and wear you down in the same areas, but it also has like small little pieces of annoyance, like the things that move you away from a stable location. That's not like not like it doesn't hurt you like that, but like you're like, dang, that sucks, but you can make it through. So I think it has a really nice Treachery balance for a custom campaign. I think it's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very high praise, and it is owed entirely to playtesting.
Yes.
It is owed entirely to playtesters.
This is something that...
so many cards have such BS versions previously.
And this is something that even Axolotl says, that the playtesting is huge. And once again, if you're listening and you want to design a custom campaign, get ready to playtest the heck out of it. And is also, like, it's one of those things that I know I always feel guilty about after I play, I'm playing live on Twitch and Salty Justin appears, because Salty Justin is much different than regular Justin. But as a designer, that you understand that sometimes that happens, especially because, like, this game has so much variance to it too, and it's like hard to like really balance, and that's why playtesting is so critical, and getting playtesters is so critical.
Yep. Yeah. The crucial thing when I get feedback that's from a Salty Justin style is figuring out whether it's they just drew 6 auto fails and they're feeling mad about it, or there is a key problem that has pissed this person off that needs to be addressed.
Yeah,
because sometimes it is the former, but sometimes it is definitely the latter.
Yeah, and then that's where like the practice of design comes in too, right? Because, and then sometimes you can like just try a change and see if it works, and then if you're like, no, I liked it the original way, you have the power to just go back because it's done digitally for at least custom campaigns, right?
Yep.
Sorry, you go.
There is a reason that most custom campaign designers don't start by making their stuff available for print and play.
Yes, yeah. I actually have this campaign print and play. I'm excited to play it with Travis and Bryn. That's going to be... I'm very curious, because I like playing in paper. I actually get less salty when I play in paper. It's weird.
Wonderful.
But I'm looking forward to playing this one. One thing I want to do, because... this is something that I have in my notes to ask for questions here, but also even more so knowing that you were such a fan of Arkham Second, because I agree, the thing I miss most in Arkham Horror, the card game, is Arkham. And I it's like one of those things too, like in Circle Undone is the campaign where we are in Arkham the most, right? Like, it is the most Arkham. But like you said, we do end up leaving Arkham as it comes. So, like, I love a scenario where I'm in Arkham, and being in Arkham for 4 scenarios in this campaign is really fun. And obviously these locations are all big from the board game. But I wanted to know, like, because they each have such a distinct flavor, where you got like the idea for the flavor for each of them. So you can just like go in any order, and I'm just going to follow with my camera and show the cards on there.
So the core idea I hit on was that these locations are going to be showing up over and over again. Mm-hmm. So they need to be things that investigators will like. Not every location needs to be perfect for every investigator, but there needs to be a location on the board for any given investigator. Mm-hmm. There needs to be somewhere that Rex Murphy likes, and there needs to be somewhere that Zoe likes, and there needs to be somewhere that Winnie likes. Mm-hmm. And those places don't have to be the same, but they all have to exist.
Yep.
And in trying to answer that question, I had that before I knew, because there are 8 locations in this version of Arkham. There are a lot more in Arkham Second Edition. Yeah. I knew that I was going to do something mechanically tying each one to, like, making one someone's favorite location before I knew which locations I was going to be using.
Yeah.
And so I wrote down a list of, like, all of these things that people do in Arkham that helps them win the game. Things that are like, this deck likes to do this, or this deck does this, or such and such.
Yeah.
And, came up with some various effects for some of them, like, thought through, then whittled it down and cross-referenced it with the existing Arkham locations to be like, okay, what could be one-to-one? What makes sense? And some of them were super easy, super obvious. Mm-hmm. The Orne Library cares about hand size. The Ma's boarding house cares about allies. Yep. Wow! I can't believe it. Ma's boarding house cares about allies? It's not like they figured that out in the Midnight Masks or anything.
Yeah.
But some of them took a little longer. Ye Olde Magic Shop was almost not going to be one until I hit on it doesn't have to be spells, it has to be expensive.
Okay, yep.
Thing of the Magic Shop. Because the Magic Shop's thing is, if you see me in Beecher, it's just that you have stuff that costs a bunch. Because spells, relics, big guns, they all cost a bunch.
Yes, yeah.
So, being explicit here. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, because few people comment on this.
Okay.
Each of the locations tells you what it's going to be about.
Yes.
In flavor text.
Yes, I did notice that. Yeah, I did, because it's like one of those things that's it's with the flavor, it's telling you, kind of like hinting to what you're going to be doing there, which is really really cool.
But Hibbs is about over succeeding.
Yep.
It's also the one that is sort of the default because I don't think, aside from Stella, there's a character that doesn't like to over succeed.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much.
And even Stella likes to over succeed. She just doesn't like to over succeed on the first test of her turn. Ma is about allies, which, given that most investigators only have one ally slot, I figured to focus on the ally cost with the defend rather than the number of allies.
Yeah.
Armitage and the Orn are about hand size and additional draw. So Harvey Walters. It was important to me that Daisy would like the Orn library.
Yes. No. Definitely. That would be a. That's one thing that Travis would have commented on if it wasn't the thing. Like, why wouldn't Daisy want to come here? I agree. You need to have things like that.
It was important to me that things kind of made sense. That the Arkham Advertiser, Rex Murphy usually plays a fair number of events. Like, Rex is going to enjoy the Advertiser. Might enjoy the library more, but like, he'll certainly go to either of these, or maybe Hibbs.
Yeah.
The General Store, by a stroke of luck, because Bob was not spoiled when the General Store was designed. It's so funny to me that Bob is like, yes, I love the location that cares about just the sheer number of assets.
Yeah, all that. This is the one that always was the hard one for me because I don't play a lot of assets, but this actually works perfect to what you were saying, how there has to be not something for everybody. There has to be something for everybody, but not like everyone can do everything.
Exactly. Which
is really nice. And also that like everything, I remember the first time I was playing, I was like, this is going to be really hard, but especially with how the initiating the test puts stuff down, it's all very doable. Even if you don't have a lot of assets, you can still figure it out and make it work.
Yeah. The Advertiser is about events, because events are news. It was a bad pun that I stuck with. The Bank is about money.
Yeah, that was. I don't know how you got that one. That one sounds pretty out there.
And the River Docks is about skill cards.
Yes. Yeah.
Which folks that are committed to the Union was one that I was like, this is too cute. People will get it, and people still don't get it.
I'm seeing if I even get it.
What do you do with skill cards?
You commit them.
Folks that are committed to the Union.
Okay, yeah, all right, that's good.
It's dumb puns. It's just it's all dumb puns all over the board. But those themes were needed to shine through because every investigator is going to like one of them.
Yes, yeah.
And most investigators are going to like at least two of them.
And then that kind of fits with what your goal was, that they can get 4 or 5 of them, right? So they're gonna find the ones that they want, and then focus those ones first, and then maybe they'll pick up one more on the way. Yeah.
One of the things that was crucial to me was that you actually give a shit about Arkham.
Yes.
Because if you're playing this campaign and you're like, I don't care. These are points. I want some more points. So the effects had to be not just this is helpful, but oh, this is good.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Every effect on the board to start is something that's oh yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. No, definitely. And they all have nice little things. For example, just even the Orn library. It's really nice because you can just go there, right? And then you just passively just get more cards. You don't even need to work for it. It's really nice. Other ones help you search, right? I have done so much. The reason, I think the Hibbs one is particularly really nice because, it's just, so passively good that, players are we must protect Hibbs. We gotta keep Hibbs safe, right? And then, especially now knowing on, your second playthrough, what the how things can get infected and then become negative, which we'll get to once we get to the actual scenario where those start showing up. That becomes very important too, because then you're I don't want to lose this good effect. As well too, one thing I really enjoyed, and I'm pretty sure I told you this when I was doing my rerun of it, but just the different layouts for how locations, like how you happen to have your miasma locations line up, can really change the pace of your Arkham board on replays. Like, so for my first playthrough, I had I think I had one more, but I know I at least had the bottom three were all infected. So that meant that in a lot of scenarios, going down to the bottom half of the board was bad, bad, not good.
Yeah.
And then in my second time, it was these three, which meant that the right side of the board was bad, bad, not good. And this has a huge impact in scenario 4.
Yep.
Which like really changes the player choice, which is I think just a huge success of the Arkham side of this campaign, because it has this pacing that is just really can just change up how you have to approach a scenario, which I think is really cool.
So, as a quick aside, I do have some of the old playtest files.
Ooh, let's go.
This is, I forget which version of Night on the Town this was, but fun story. The whole people need to actually care about Arkham thing.
Yeah.
I'm also getting a little feedback really quick. One of the things that changed with that is that I had to give it faces.
Okay, so originally the defend was on the location.
Originally, all the text was on the location.
Yeah.
It was just the location, and you flipped that. But there was a combination of when players started the level with like 7 locations with complicated effects on them, with the helpful effect of the location combined with the test you have to make.
Yeah. It's overwhelming.
Players would start the scenario and just like sit there and stare at the board for like 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's a lot to read right on the get-go, yeah.
And so it was very much a solving one problem with another. How do I make people care about the board and care about these locations beyond just they have helpful effects? And how do I reduce the overhead of starting the scenario? What if I put the like thing you're doing, the objective at each location, on a person that only shows up when you go there?
Yeah, and that's a very elegant solution, because it makes it so that because it's so I'm speaking as like the quote unquote, I play a lot of Arkham, so I'm calling myself like an Arkham expert here, but like when you move into a location and you see this happen, you get the character, it not only does it bring the complexity down at the beginning, but now the players are going to be like, who is on the other locations? I can't wait to see who they are, right? And then also now it makes even more sense too that the flavor text on the back is kind of hinting to you what you need to do. By the way, on Ma's boarding house, is that Captain Jack Sparrow on the Mona Lisa?
It is.
I'm just realizing that right now.
Art sourcing is complicated.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes you have to use a piece that has 90% of the elements you want, and 10% you really don't want.
This is something that I will guarantee to anyone who wants to make their own campaign. The hardest part is going to be finding the art. Especially if you don't want to reuse art that maybe someone else used in a custom campaign, because there's a lot of great art out there, but finding your perfect art might be a little bit tricky, and you might sometimes need Jack Sparrow to show up, which is really funny now that I've noticed that. Yeah.
Listen, Ma is just a huge fan of a movie series that won't be out for like 80 years. It's fine. No,
Ma was lost in time and space for a bit. She came out in 2009, and she watched them and she was like, these are great, and then she picked one up at the store on the way back. Perfect.
Listen, she time traveled with Finn Edwards. As we all know, Finn Edwards is a time traveler. That's why he has smuggled goods everywhere. And they went to a theater together. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. That is really cool to know, that the design process, because moving the defend onto the Arkham Citizens assets is really cool. And knowing that it solved some problems that you were having, I think is just a really cool intel to know about the design process of this.
The other thing that was nice about it was it cracked open some issues I was having later on.
Okay.
And let me, as you know, these characters can show up again in the
Yeah.
Afternoon War to help you out again.
Yeah.
And there was this thing in the Afternoon War, I'm like, I need a panic button. Hey, remember those characters? Can I use them as a panic button?
Yeah, no,
And it was nice because then they're helping you.
Yeah, that's great.
Help them.
That's really cool.
The last thing I'm going to say about this scenario
Yeah.
is one story that I absolutely love. That's
Yep.
another great, like, warning to people who are making their own stuff. There is a playtesting story that I love to retell about this scenario, which is in a version fairly close to this version. I want to say this was around personal playtest. I had probably gone up to like 70 at this point.
Yeah.
But like outer playtests, someone came to me and was like, this scenario sucks. This scenario is garbage. It's so boring. You need to completely start over.
Yeah.
And I was a little put aback by that because it's one thing to get feedback that's like, yeah, there's this problem, or like, if they had told me like, it sucks, everything got infected, it's like way too hard, I would have been like, oh yeah, cool, I have some tuning to do. But their thing was, this is way too easy. At that time, you were allowed to use values that boost your skill test on defend tests.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
And after I asked some questions, it turns out that Mark Harrigan healed for over 30 damage over the course of this scenario.
Oh, wow.
They didn't use a single clue to pass a defend test. Instead, they just pinged Sophie 4 times.
Wow. Yeah.
It was so funny. So if you go, why can't I lucky a defend test, or why can't I unexpected courage, not unexpected, why can't I live and learn a defend test? That's why.
Yeah.
So that Sophie can't
break
so
your
that
scenario.
Sophie cannot simply, the ghost of Mark's dead wife can't simply defend all of Arkham.
All by herself. Oh, that's crazy. And I like that too, because like obviously the flavor of the defend, as I was saying, it becomes like, it seems very daunting, but then like with the clues, it's still very reasonable. But that's funny to know that that's the reason why the text ultimately exists, because of the ghost of Sophie. That's really funny.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's, any designer will have stories in their head, especially with Luke Robinson, of how someone came in with this card and I have to completely redesign this scenario now.
Yeah. And man, that's just gonna become more and more difficult as the card pool grows too. Like, yeah.
I'm quoted as saying before, I'm sad that Pocket Telescope exists.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
In the same way that I am sad that Mindwipe exists.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
They're not necessarily cards that a lot of people will play, but if someone is playing them, it could, just this niche effect could collapse a scenario.
Yeah, especially
It's a fun time.
Like designs, like it's like with like Pocket Telescope and Horror and High Gear gives you an advantage, but that's not the same as breaking a mechanic, which can be a little bit tougher to remedy.
Well, remember how many people back in the day when Dunwich was the only thing that existed would talk about, oh, well, the tech for Undimensioned and Unseen is bring 2 copies of Mindwipe.
Yep.
And you note that they have never printed a boss enemy that's important without Elite on it since.
Yeah, exactly, yep. Yeah. So that's one of the things too, that even then, like, just if you ever feel disheartened by that as someone making custom content, just know that it happened to the actual designers too. It happens to them.
It happens to
all
everybody.
the time. Yeah, it's normal.
Everybody. It is a badge of honor. You are truly amongst good company when you have had an entire scenario created by Luke Robinson's teleporting.
Amen. All right, let's go on to scenario. Even though we talked about scenario 2, I mean, I think the Arkham stuff has the bigger groundwork that we need to chat about. So
Yes, agreed.
I'm gonna grab we'll get scenario 1 in here. This one, there's not, I think, for me on the questions. I mean, there's one question we're going to get to when it's revealed. But, like, I think the design on this one is really nice for a starting scenario, which are very important.
Yes.
Because they need to hook the player, and it needs to also, even though it's very unlikely that someone's first scenario is going to be this in the entire game of Arkham. They're like, I know, I'm gonna play Arkham. This custom campaign looks like where I should start.
Let me just buy all the cards I need to play Arkham, or let me just download the Super Complete Edition mod.
Yeah, and then
the first thing I'm gonna do is this.
But like the starting scenario should also have, like, it should be a little bit. It should be paced like a starting scenario, right?
Yes.
They have to be. They have their own flavor. So how did that process go for this one for you?
A starting scenario has a number of jobs it has to do. Mm-hmm. It has to introduce the story. It has to set the stage, and that's hard. Any writer will tell you that's hard. Mm-hmm. The start of your story can be quite tricky to get right. It has to introduce key mechanics. If there's a mechanic that's going to show up in your campaign repeatedly, probably should show up in the first scenario. Mm-hmm. If it shows up more than twice, it needs to be in the start.
Yes, yeah, that's actually some very good advice. Yeah.
It needs to, in the case of campaigns that have encounter sets that go throughout it, it needs to introduce some of the encounter set themes.
Yep.
Even if those encounter sets don't get to fire on all cylinders, some of the things need to show up. Curtain Call needed to have the hidden cards in it. Pit of Despair needed to have a bunch of deep ones that engage you and do horrible, nasty, not so great effects. Mm-hmm. And because of all that, I'm a big believer that the first scenario is almost never the best scenario in the campaign, but it is frequently one of the best designed scenarios in the campaign.
Yeah, I can't really. I mean, I'm looking at, like, even going to Circle Undone, a campaign I don't really like. I think the Witching Hours are really. I think, like, it's really good, but I think also what's to go off what you're saying. It also, to me, is like one of the moodiest of the scenarios, right? Like, because it's setting the stage, right? So, like, it's, really tight, and everything is happening for such a specific reason. Definitely. Yeah.
First scenarios are hard, and I can't recommend them, which is why it was dumb of me to start from the beginning, but I did. You wake up in a morgue. Yeah,
and actually, honestly, one thing I love about your first scenario here is that you start in a room, and it's like the Gathering. Obviously, less tutorialized than the Gathering, right? But, like, the same basic concept. You're in a room, and you have an objective. Your objective is get the clues, get the barricades off of this location, right? Move in, and then the map opens up, right? Which is where it gets spicy. All right, I'm going to absolutely butcher these, so I'll let you put the locations out. But so, like,
I usually do it like this, but players, I've seen a million different ways of arranging it because there's not, like, an official.
Yeah. Nice. I always have Lab Alpha on the bottom. That's funny.
See, the thing is, Lab Alpha on the bottom makes more thematic sense, given once you figure out that you're underground. But, for some reason, this is always how I laid it out.
Nice.
It's not crucial to be laid out in any one direction.
Oh,
I've seen players do, like this.
Oh, spicy. But, like, so what's really nice, again, about the pace of this one is that then it comes into, you get the whole map, but you also get the forced effect on Lab Omega.
Yes, the first miasma.
Yes. And then you're immediately like, oh no, something bad is happening. You leave the safety of the morgue and it's worse. And you also get the flavor text on the morgue. The green mist, it's like, because one thing I really like is when your campaign tells a story without the story text, right? Like when you can tell your story with just the text on the agenda and the act cards, and then the text on the locations. And I think this one still, even without all the other reading, does really good at keeping you in the mood of the story.
Yep. There's a bit I like from various creative things. I forget who first coined it, but like the interesting stuff should always be happening to the players.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that is the cool stuff to experience should be what the players are experiencing.
Definitely.
If your scenario is the boring stuff that has to happen before the players get to do the cool stuff, then it shouldn't be a scenario.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, just move it 20 minutes into the future when they're doing the fun stuff. Yeah.
That's a big part of how I DM when I run role-playing games is, okay, let's skip to the interesting part.
Yeah, definitely. So the locations, they're all pretty... I like that you have, like, things that, like, the stories within the stories, which are really cool. Like this put out a fire, which I'm going to put out the fire. It's on the card.
Oh, everyone does.
Yeah. But it's like such a fun little story piece, and then you don't know what it does, but this goes to your point that you were saying, hey, like, this is like burning your house down, but throughout, like, it's going to have effects later on as well, which I think is really cool. And then I also like how the flavor text has the blood of Balshandor in there as well.
Yeah, that was a very cheeky thing, because I knew pretty early on that Balshandor was the ancient one I was going to be using.
Yeah.
But Balshandor isn't like an established ancient one. He's just the entity referenced in the blood of Balshandor.
Yes, yeah.
So by putting it there, I think I even watched in your playthrough, you're like, oh, cute, blood of Balshandor. And then your second playthrough, it's like, oh,
look at that! Look at
the
that!
book was in the library.
That's the guy.
They had the book. Of course, they ended up with him.
Yeah. And then one of my favorite things is the ripped hallway. The ripped hallway, which I imagine it just connects.
Funny story.
Yeah.
Ripped hallway was originally going to be torn hallway.
Okay.
But in the Arkham font, the T looked like an N. And people would be like, the Norn hallway? Or like it wasn't the... No, it was the R and the N.
Yeah, this looks like Tom Hallway. Tom Hallway?
And so it looked like Tom Hallway. Yeah. And so I changed the name to Ripped Hallway, which is a worse name. But
better
it's readable.
Yeah, because you can't really like change. I think that's like kerning or some other thing. You can't really fix that in the custom content card maker. But that's actually really funny, Tom Hallway.
So, ladies and gentlemen, my good friend Tom Hallway.
Yeah. But this has the briefcase.
Yep.
Which I didn't dream that we talked about this, but this was partly inspired by the gnome from Half-Life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I first knew it as the gnome from Left 4 Dead.
Yeah.
Because a friend made me do the gnome Left 4 Dead in the Carnival. Here's an earlier version of the briefcase when it was slightly less well done. But even from the beginning, I was like, what's an effect that people would be super tempted to just reach in? Because, like, the effect's so good.
Yeah.
And immediately I'm like, what if it was emergency cash? What if you just got a free emergency cash every time you pulled in that bag?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of investigators who'd go, free emergency cash?
Yeah, I could use 3 money right now. I could use 3 money.
Let me just rifle around in this bag and, I think I pricked my hand on something.
Yeah. Even a Dark Horse player, you're like, I could load 3 resources into my fire axe right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And So yeah, it was that core idea of, I love that idea of just, here's something that you have to do throughout an entire story that is onerous, and like it pays off a little maybe here and there, but you'd have to carry it the whole damn way.
Yeah.
But if you do, that's achievements, baby.
Yeah.
Or in the case of this, that's a special ending, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's I love this aspect of it, and I did it on my second playthrough, and it's well, it sucks that Rita had one hand full the entire time. It was still just a good time. I like that. It's a great addition to it. It's fantastic.
If you carry the briefcase the whole way, you get the true ending without having to side with that frickin' weasel.
And that's the good news.
That's the way I like to put it, is the true ending is either carrying the briefcase or helping West defeat Valshandor.
Yeah.
But if you carry the briefcase, you can throw West in the wood chipper where he belongs.
Yeah, exactly. We then have also the last big addition. There's Agent Grayson, and she's a character that you like. I like the thing you have here where she's blocking the exit. I think that's really cool. But then we got the big boss that we're going to become very close friends with, the first among many, who is actually a small little baby for its stats the first time you see him.
He's a tiny baby guy.
Yeah.
Completely harmless.
Like 2. He has 2s in his stats. And I like this because it's just like the scaling of him is cool from a story perspective. And then also from a design perspective, I really like how it scales up in terms of how he becomes scarier and scarier. And then my favorite version of him is the final version, which is I think is good, like, because that's what you want, right? You want the final version to be memorable. Yeah.
The rule I had was every time he comes back, he has to have gained either a stat, a keyword, or an ability. Perfect.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. It's great art too. There's a lot of like when you find art that just you're like, that's perfect. I imagine though there was a good chunk of at least of Resident Evil inspired art out there.
There was a fair amount, though I tried to avoid using too much direct references.
Definitely.
It was very helpful for locations though.
Oh yeah, I can believe that, yeah. Sweet. I'm just looking through the encounter deck. Yeah, if you can do the same, if there's any notable ones here. I'm kind of just showing, so like this is the example I talked about earlier, Dissonant Voices. It's just Dissonant Voices, but just with art that kind of fits the mood of the campaign.
So one thing I was talking about earlier that I'd love to quickly mention is the driving urge suppressing fire combo.
Sure, yes. Driving urge suppressing fire.
I knew movement was something I wanted to matter throughout the campaign, and so I was like, that needs to be core. Well, damage and take 2 horror are like the key effects.
Yeah.
They're like the marquee card in every campaign. We just, like, you look at Edge of the Earth, which came out, like a year ago at this point, but still, and there are cards that Ice Shaft and I forget the horror one. But regardless, they're similar. It's take 2 damage, take 2 horror, plus campaign mechanic.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I think if you're designing custom content, there's a joke in Magic of bear with set mechanic.
Yeah.
Rotting Remains with campaign mechanic
and
or
Grasping
Hands with scenario mechanic are both perfect cards.
Yes, yeah. They're almost like a kind of like a must for your design too, because you need to put pressure on and they're already so good. And I like with this one too, you're both driving urge and suppressing fire, that the damage in the horror are like when you draw the driving urge as a rogue, you're like, okay, I'm taking 2 horror. You draw it as the mystic, and you're like, I might still move, and that's still kind of tough, but it's not like a Rotting Remains level of difficulty, which is still like a great card. It's a very elegant, and that's why Rotting Remains with campaign mechanic is good. But it's I like the design on these ones a lot.
Another one of my core philosophies with encounter cards is that the best encounter card is awful, except for when it's exactly the card you need.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is just a dynamite, a jury-rigged incendiary.
That's a running joke. I have heard so many stories of people being like, actually, this kills like 5 enemies right now if one of us is just willing to take 3 damage.
Yeah. And also yeah, and it's also just like still just an action, which I really like. Like it's
what it actually is you can't leave the location this turn.
Yeah, it's simple, right? Like it's this is something that because I've played a lot of custom stuff right now, that you don't need to like, you can your encounter cards can basically just simply be, hey, you're like this turn is basically null, right? Like you can still do other things, but you can't move. Like also like because Dissonant Voice is in this. Dissonant Voice is an example where like most of the time this can be nothing, but then sometimes you're like, this is the worst card I've seen in my entire life, right?
Yep.
And like on the inverse,
it's okay for an encounter card to have no effect.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's also, once again, if you're designing a custom campaign, to not make all of your encounter cards be a haymaker, because then they're going to be on the ground and the bell's going to be ringing right away.
It's important to have haymakers.
Yes, but
you
not all the
should have
time.
some haymakers.
Yeah.
But if your whole deck is haymakers, that's not going to be a fun time.
And then also...
honestly, you can't afford your whole deck being haymakers till like the final 2 scenarios in a campaign, and even then. Yeah. And like, even then.
And like a haymaker, even though like it doesn't read it, like Rotting Remains is a haymaker, right? Like it can deal 3 horror.
Autofail on Rotting Remains is a hell of a hit.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a reason they don't actually do a lot of take X where X is what you failed by.
Yes, because it's brutal.
Some of the more recent scenarios.
All right. Yeah, and the Idle Hands is another one, I think, because this Idle Hands is that's an actual card too, right? It's the guy with his hand
it's
going
from
like
Dunwich.
This. Yeah,
it's from Return to Dunwich.
Yeah.
Idle Hands is a card that helps to solve the balance issues of solo versus 4-player.
Yes, yeah.
Because in 4-player, 1 player gets an extra action. Cool. In solo, 1 player gets an action. Your 1 player gets 1 extra action. Holy shit, that's huge.
Yeah, yeah. Sweet. All right. Let's go on to scenario 3, Dead by Dawn.
Talk to the good doctor.
All right. So this one, this is the one, as I talked about earlier, the Tenuous Allies. So they don't take up any slots, and when the game ends or this card would leave play, remove this card and Tenuous Allies from the game. It's a way for you, as I said, for players to be able to interact with content that they might not have due to the decisions or how their playthrough went. And I think it's just really nice for that one.
It's also a way to reward players for decisions in previous scenarios with things that would be way too powerful to just give them.
Yes, this was really cool. This was really, because I got that on my first one, but on my second one. But the agency backup, I think that's a very clever idea. Yeah, I love that.
Because it doesn't completely imbalance the scenario to have agency backup.
Mm-hmm.
But it would completely imbalance the campaign if you just shoved agency backup in someone's deck for the remainder of the campaign.
Here you go, draw 5 experience. Yay! So with this one, any stories on the design process for how this one goes?
This was one of the cleanest ones, down to the locations. I early on came up with the idea of, okay, you have 2 big loops because there's going to be enemies chasing you, back to that like Finn Edwards thing of like, you can easily run away from anything at any point, but it's always slowly catching up to you.
Yeah,
which is the core of this scenario, is that every one of the zombies is just a pushover. Like, by any standards, like the worst of them, like maybe Brutus, is like, oh, I have to pass a 3 and do 2 damage to this enemy. Oof, I don't know if I can do that. Um, the problem with the reanimated is not that they're dangerous. It's that there's a bunch of them.
Yes, yeah.
And that as they pile up, anyone who's played Rita or Finn or Trish can tell you the problem is when you get 3 enemies on the same location.
Yes. And then it's just like a kill ball rolling towards you.
And this whole scenario is kind of, let's make those guardians have to deal with the kill ball for once.
Yeah. I know that in my second playthrough, I did the dynamite on these guys with the incendiary, and that was fun. That was like, let's go. That was a good time.
Once again, the best encounter cards, my favorite type of encounter cards are ones that sometimes are actually the effect you needed.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes one spot closer to a miasma location is where you were planning on moving this turn.
Yeah, definitely.
Sometimes the bomb is more dangerous to the monsters. But the big fun bit of this scenario is, of course,
Yeah.
the design story was having to add this hint.
Yeah, careful, this will not... I actually completely forgot about this on my replay.
So I had to add that hint after my best friend playtested this. One of my best friends playtested this scenario for the first time that they playtested it. They saved West. They got to West. They got like 7 clues out of the 5 out of the 6 necessary clues.
Yeah.
And then they delved too deep twice.
Oh my goodness. Oh no, oh no.
And for those who have failed this scenario, they will know that that is actually a campaign loss.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Well, so fun story. We haven't talked much about the red text stuff. You are given the option if you fail this scenario, a la what's the actual... What Maxine has said about City of Archives, where the whole you can play as a Yithian,
Yeah.
but actually that's just like you lost the campaign. If you want to keep playing as a Yithian for fun,
Yeah.
feel free, but you lost. Like, it explicitly gives you the option in the campaign guide of you can lose. You can just say, we all die sometime, we lose.
Yeah.
Or you can keep playing.
Wow. So the red text stuff, we haven't really touched on that. It's a cool thing. I really like it. It really gives a storytelling that exists beyond the games, which is really cool. And I think also I love how we'll touch on it quickly. I'm just showing this as well. I'm reading this for myself the first time because obviously I avoid that red text like the
as well you should.
Yeah.
It's the Plaguebearer talking.
It is, yeah. Man, that's a
just
brutal
because the
change.
first one was nice doesn't mean you should keep listening to him.
So yeah, then the first one. So going back to this, the first one where how it was nice. It's teaching you in this for the remainder of the time, for the remainder of the campaign. The first time you read a block of text that references you reading it, resolve that text. And then each investigator reads this, begins the scenario with 2 additional resources. It's a nice way, of tutorializing. Well, not exactly like a key mechanic, a flavor mechanic that matters in ways, which I think is really, really nice. I love that the red text aspect.
It needs to be positive the first time because otherwise people will just go, well, that's dumb, and ignore it.
Yeah, definitely.
If it's positive, then they'll go, hey, you should read this because I read it and I got 2 extra resources, so we should all read this.
Yeah.
And then from then on, it's a choice every time.
To be honest, like now this makes so much sense because I remember reading while I was reading through it was stuff like if your investigator has died, and I was like, what do you mean? Like, or something like that. It's cool. That's neat. I did not know about that, how you could lose that one. Yeah.
Well, there's another thing at a later point where you can die, but Herbert West is there, so
Interesting.
And at the end of scenario 7, you can die, but Herbert West is there, and he just brings you back to life.
Whoa, I did not. I just saw a page that just said each investigator is killed over and over again. That's a rough day for those investigators.
Do we want to talk about that? We'll talk about the resolutions later.
Yeah, well, we can get to that. Yeah.
But the investigator defeat in scenario 7, because Herbert West is there, he just brings you back to life if you were killed during the scenario.
Spicy. It's fun.
Which is a little bait and switch, because there's a mechanic in the scenario that can kill you.
Yeah.
But if your group wins the scenario, you don't actually have to restart.
You're A-okay.
You don't have to start the final scenario with no XP.
I'm going to just show here that this, for the first among many, he gets big and he also eats other enemies, which I think is really cool.
He's gained Retaliate, and he gains stats as he eats.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. This scenario clicked with me a lot more in my second playthrough. I think it's a very stressful first time, but when you have like your second one, it becomes you kind of like you're like, oh, I know what I need to do, and I think that's a really nice aspect. I think that if the blind one can provide you with like a level of stress, I think that's a good go at it.
I think most campaigns have some scenarios that playing them blind is terrifying.
Yes, yeah. So
City of Archives included.
Yes, yeah. Luckily, I've never been a Githian. I've always been I've always gotten out on that one. I've never been defeated on that one. That's because I play skill cards, so like my decks are like built for it. So Morning Chorus, scenario 4. This is my personal favorite of the campaign.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I'm very much a mood player.
Okay.
I love a scenario that tells a cool story. And I think this one tells a really cool story, while at first being mechanically daunting. I remember when I read it the first time, I had like one of those like I'm going cross-eyed moments. But then you do it once and you're like, oh, actually this mechanic's really easy, right?
That is my biggest flaw as a designer. I write mechanics that when you play them, they make sense, but getting them in your head is a nightmare.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's tough. Like, it's not something that's just like you can just write what you can't write what you do as a designer into like one sentence and make it be easy. It's so hard to do that. But I love how this one plays. So as we're seeing now, there are the cards that become bad. Like, let's say, for example, let's do the Orn Lyra became bad. It's replaced with the Miasma version. And then you also get unique encounter cards added, which is really cool. And then there is the bad guy gets put into the procession deck, but you get like the bad guy version of the people. And a moment of silence for poor Hibbs. How dare you not save him?
He's just gutted.
Yeah, poor guy. I love your taglines for them. They're really
Well, he's just gutted. If the Hibbs death text, if he's infected, involves him getting like surrounded by a group and cut open.
Ah, okay, yeah. Pulls
and so he's just gutted. He's literally been gutted. Good job.
Yeah, I think this one's just... I love the flavor of it. I love when you put up the barricades and this dumb priest walks right into them because he's just going.
The Beard has repeatedly made the joke of the priest is a Skyrim NPC.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. That's very accurate.
Who's just patting through an entire village of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just like going... one thing I love with this scenario as well is that while there's a lot happening, your objective is paced out very wonderfully where you were like, okay, we're going to have to just keep this guy in check. And then you're slowly like, oh, this is how we kill him. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. One quick thing I want to talk about while we're here is the encounter cards.
Yes.
So they each punish the thing that they each like hurt the thing that the good side does.
Yes.
So like, you know too much is all about you really only can have like 4 cards in your hand. But the trick with all of them is that these actually make the campaign easier.
Oh, yeah.
Because these are encounter cards that aren't going to synergize with the rest of the encounter sets.
Yep.
And the ones that are almost guaranteed to be in there are the ones that you
didn't do
as investigators decided weren't important.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's like one that's given randomly. Like one becomes randomly miasma. Is that correct? In scenario 2?
Yes, but even so, that's been changed from a previous version. You can always choose to at least have Ma's Boarding House or Ye Old Magic Shop or the Arkham. Like, you get to choose which ones start.
Oh, okay. Cool. Nice.
The one that's infected is chosen from the ones you didn't choose to have in play at random.
Yeah.
So, the worst case scenario is, like, River Docks or Ma's Boarding House or something gets chosen at random, but you chose actively to not have that be one of the ones that you're going to work on this campaign.
Yeah. And it's while they might read scary, it's exactly what they say. They don't synergize with other things, and they're the ones that you chose not to do. So they're a lot easier to like deal with, right?
Now they still can be a pain.
Yeah, like for example, bad news. While I was in an event deck, it still sucks to discard events in your hand if you're keeping them, right? Like they're not like a free pass, but they're still discarding a card is a lot better than taking 3 horror.
And more importantly, it's a lot better than the scenario doing what it actually wants to do to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, oh no, I have to lose a bunch of money. Sucks. But it's not that bad compared to, I don't know, the procession getting to move 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. Sweet.
Which is the Haymaker in this scenario. We were talking about Haymakers earlier. March of the Infected is very much meant to be the Haymaker.
Mm-hmm. I still think, though, that like this is an example of the balance, that even in a Haymaker, the players can still have some choice to it, right? And there's still some that this also scales so that even if there's a lot of it's not like a Haymaker where there's like 4 enemies on the board and it's like punch you 3 times in the face just because. It's like, okay, there's some enemies on the board. We're gonna tweak this a bit. But then you see it for the first time and you're like, test 6. I mean, it's really like test 5 because this guy's in play.
Yes, it is always test 5 and it might be less.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good example of showing that your Haymakers should be able to make someone hurt, but you can also still provide some flexibility to your Haymakers as well.
So as a quick aside, it's funny to me that you describe this one as your favorite, because it's maybe the one I'm least satisfied with, the one I would most go back and change on a redesign.
Interesting. I'm a weird one, though. I admittedly, I'm very weird.
Because I like to joke that this scenario, I realized recently during the homebrew play along, that this scenario feels a little bit like a Marvel Champions scenario. Where you and the game are trading blow for blow, like you're spinning up your engine, like trying to get out from under, and then there's a point where you get out from under it, and all the tension leaves the room.
That's fair. That's very fair. That's
and the game doesn't end for another 3 rounds.
Yeah, while you watch the dumb guy walk into boxes, yeah.
Exactly. While you have clearly dealt enough damage to kill Venom, you just gotta wait for a couple more turns of 5 to 10 damage here or there.
Yeah.
You've put enough barricades down, now you just need to not lose while the priest walks 3 locations forward.
That's very fair, yeah. So yeah, I imagine that would also be pretty easy to tweak too, but I suppose at the same time, sometime this is also something that Axolotl said, where you gotta just have to like hands up and be like, okay,
exactly,
this is where it is.
There are a number of things that I would tweak, because there's always stuff you would tweak.
Always.
I committed to, as soon as I made my print and play available, that was it for the cards.
Yeah.
Cards could not change.
Yeah.
I could tweak the guide for like errata and like, oh my god, this rule is wrong. But cards were fixed in place.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's good. And then like that also means that yeah, like limitations like that too, because I am someone who would edit forever if the time came.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we're back in the lab, and this one, it's I call this one like the 3 mini game scenario, where you do 3 little mini games, and then the first among many shows up again, because it's if you haven't picked it up by now, it is a odd number scenario, which means this guy shows up. And
he does.
Beefy.
It turns out eating a lot of zombies, good. It's a good protein.
Yeah, makes him very strong.
But he gains a very crucial ability.
Cannot make attacks of opportunity?
Yep.
Yep, that's huge.
I like to refer to that as the like Resident Evil or Dark Souls effect. Because he hits like a truck, but he telegraphs his attack.
Yeah.
Pretty significantly.
He just slowly lifts his fist up and then brings it down. And you're like, okay.
So, you can dodge. It's just a matter of getting away.
Yeah. One mechanic I really like in this scenario is being able to move into the safe room.
So this scenario is the most directly referential towards Resident Evil.
It makes sense.
You are in an underground facility. There's a stupid crest puzzle.
Yeah.
You're exploring a map and repeatedly returning to a safe room to reset because you explored it slightly wrong.
That's really funny. I love that.
This was the most like mechanically like I want to put the mechanics of Resident Evil in a scenario of Arkham. Yeah. That was the guiding light for this one.
That's that. It does make sense, especially the crest puzzle. Yeah.
That was giving away the game. That was like being like, if you haven't caught on by now, this is Resident Evil.
That's great. I love that. That's fantastic.
A crest that had a puzzle that involves a crest that. Why? Why would there be? Why would a lock need a crest made of 2 halves that you just shove together? Why would a police station have a unicorn crest statue? What? Why?
It just does. It just does. Yeah.
One thing that I absolutely love about this scenario is there was this beautiful moment where I was doing the logic on these and being like, wait a minute, if you do 3 then 2, then no matter how you split that cake, originally it was going to be 5 locations of each one required 1 thing to move below.
Yeah.
And even then it still works, but I added it in the holding cell because 5 was a little onerous.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
But even if you have 5 locations that each require an effect to move downwards, it always works.
Interesting.
No matter how you shuffle that deck, you cannot lock.
Cool. That's neat. I do agree that I think like having the one that's just like, pardon me, you can't fit through this tunnel is nice, but that is cool to know that there could have been 5 and it still would never lock.
Yep, but that's another like kill your darlings thing is, hey, this is a really cool piece of design trivia.
Yeah. It's
not in the actual game because it was boring.
Yeah, and it makes it so that also then it tells I love this as well because it tells like a story too, and it also provides the opportunity for jokes, right? Where someone's just like in the way, you're like, "Can you go?" It's like, "No, no."
Can I just oop right past you?
Yeah. Nope. There's no room. There's no room.
But there's a zombie behind me. If I could just, nope.
This scenario also, am I remembering it right? Is there a Yithian observer in this scenario somewhere?
Yes. So the idea with that is that if you put out the fire in the library, then Yog-Sothoth's friends show up.
Yes,
if you don't, Cthulhu's friends show up.
Yeah. Neat. Yeah, no, I like that. I like that little thing in the cases of things mattering, right? And like all that. Yeah, because there's the burned, Yeah, and then it becomes Fire City. And then there is that's where it is. These are where they are. And then the Offer Power shows up. Once again, these both still have unique art, which I think is just a great touch to do. Yeah. I like that. And then this is the case of exactly as you were saying, where if you burn your house down or not, it matters up until all this stuff. And I love going back and seeing like Lab Omega again. Yeah, I think that's really cool.
So the reason I did this was I did want to directly reference burning your house down.
Nice. So that's why it's actually still just burning as well.
Because that mechanic was such a like cornerstone of why I wanted to make the campaign, I wanted to reference it in like something burns down or doesn't.
Cool. That's neat. That makes sense too, yeah.
Any other things? This level has one of the mechanics that could have been the meanest. But is a lot friendlier due to the balancing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the agency enemies gaining surge.
Oh yeah, that's right. And just play with 1 damage on it. Yeah.
The 1 damage was crucial. Once I caught that, it became so much more fair to give the agency enemy surge, because it's like, okay, I'll spend 1 action punching this panicked agent.
Yeah. Or like, yeah, even the agency troubleshooter, it's like, I'll spend 1 action because we're over the 3 health bump, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the Taylor security, where they might shoot you. Once again, another example of encounter card is bad unless it might be good, because sometimes the Taylor security shoots you when you're engaged with 3 infected enemies, and it's like, great, cool, I'm in the safe room.
It is nice.
I would prefer to take 1 damage.
Yeah, and even if they kill it, you're like, that's even more cool. Like it is nice, and like hearing like that is part of your inspiration for your design for stuff like this. It makes a lot of sense, because there's a lot of moments where you look at an encounter card and you're like, wait, I can actually get ahead on this, which is not often seen, but it is a cool thing to have in a scenario. Sweet. Okay.
I love that bit in Dream Eaters where you get Upton Pickman.
Yep.
And suddenly all the ghouls become, wait. No. We need as many ghouls as possible.
Yeah, they become part of the ghoul gang. Yeah. Yeah. All right, we are on the Afternoon War. So my first question, because I actually have a note for this one, is how did you choose the 2 ancient ones that are in this one?
So part of it is referencing some of the like little bits of lore they give you at the back of the Blood of Balshindor.
Okay, yeah.
But part of it was just sort of like, I wanted a scenario. There was the complaint everyone has about the final scenario of the Forgotten Age, where the Yithians and the Volusians are in open conflict.
Yeah.
And they spend the whole time fighting you.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want a scenario where like there's enemies, but like they don't matter. And like I didn't end up. So earlier versions of this, it was actively a war between 2 forces.
Yes.
And that was sort of the guiding thing. And so there needed to be multiple sides fighting.
Yeah.
But as design went on, it made more sense to be like, once again, killing your darlings. Like, it's cool, but it doesn't need to happen. And what's more interesting here is just a scenario where, like, the city is burning down and going insane, and you've got to stop that. And there's interesting choices, and, like, it's just a fun scenario rather than a super complex, like, this was a big kill your darlings moment, where I got a little bit, especially because the next 2 scenarios are so completely batch in terms of what they do with the rules.
Yeah.
Having one last, like, it's just a scenario.
Yeah, it's just normal. Yeah.
You're just putting damage and horror on locations, and there's a big monster, and you get clues.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, and It does play very elegantly, right? Like the damage in horror. It's like, and you can see the war, and then one, like, because you kind of see, then you're like, you still feel the impacts of the war because the stuff is going on the locations, right? And I love the shift at the halfway point when you beat one of it, and then you're like, okay, now we have to beat these other guys. Problem is, now only one of our stats is being focused by these enemies, and that's a problem.
And not only that, but the bosses show up and make things so much worse.
Yeah. Like, it's, where's the...
Not sure what happened to
those
the
box didn't come out. Weird.
But regardless, they have for those who played it, for those who haven't played it, the bosses have an effect. So midway through the scenario, you're made to make the decision of whether to close a portal of flame or a portal of madness. And if you close flame, all the damage dealing cards go away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you close madness, all the horror dealing cards go away. But now the encounter deck has just been thinned to only the cards that care about one of them.
Yeah.
And a boss enemy shows up with one of the meanest pieces of text I put in this campaign, which is each other enemy gets +1 damage, or each other enemy gets +1 horror.
So they become... It's a very stressful second half, which I really like. I really like that aspect of this.
Because the idea of, like, we just closed a portal, it got easier.
Yeah.
Is what would, like, almost feel natural. But that's not interesting gameplay.
No. Yeah.
What's interesting is we did it, and now things are much harder.
Yeah. Something like that can work for, like, Scenario 1. Like, Waking Nightmare has a very elegant difficulty curve to it. But not for Scenario 6. In Scenario 6, you gotta keep it interesting. This one also has the Site of the Unbinding and the Crater of the Unbinding, which is another aspect of how things are going to carry over throughout the Arkham side of this campaign.
Yep. So the idea being, if you absolutely screwed up in Morning Chorus, somewhere got blown to smithereens.
Yeah. See you later, Ma's boarding house and her prized Jack Sparrow painting.
Which might not be a bad thing. It might be a miasma location.
Yeah, exactly,
but
right?
Regardless, it's gone now.
Yeah.
Whereas if you succeeded, the place that you rallied, probably, the place you rallied second, is now permanently in danger.
Yes.
Is going to be a bit more important. But if you rallied it, that means you care about it.
Yeah.
So it's reasonable to, like, a good... I take a lot of lessons from running various role-playing games. Threaten the things your players care about.
Yeah.
Death is really boring a lot of the time. What's more interesting is threatening things that are precious to the characters.
Definitely. And, like, and I think it's a great job at, because you come to this map so many times that you naturally build that, and then it cares even more when things start going bad there. And I think that's why revisiting these maps is a nice part of this campaign, because of that. You learn to care, and then the designer over here twists the knife because of that.
But at the same time, the Arkham citizens can be back, and this time they're gonna, like, let you take a test that will clear off that. Honestly, sometimes you win the scenario off that test.
Yes, definitely. And it's a nice, like, yeah, it's such a nice storytelling moment too. This is, like, I love the Arkham half of this this campaign because of these stories that come from it. It's really nice.
A big part, I like it when a campaign is replayable, and I wanted this campaign to be replayable, and Arkham was a huge part of making that happen.
Yeah, definitely.
As one last little comment, this campaign has my favorite art in the whole campaign, and it's this one.
Oh yeah, that's a good time. I'm one of those people who nothing ever creeps me out. But if you hate this, congratulations, you might still be a person. I have already been replaced by the alien in my eye. That is great art. I love your flavor text on that one too. Yeah.
I enjoy writing flavor text quite a bit. It's a lot of people don't read flavor text, and what I have to say to them is, try it sometime.
Yeah.
There's fun stuff on there.
Yeah, definitely.
Like Ma Matheson, who is a reference in there for one of my best friends.
Nice.
Because literally she'll make you breakfast is like, oh, she's a cannibal, she will eat you. But it's also there because my best friend loves to joke about the Men at Work song Land Down Under.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the line where I met a strange lady, she made me nervous, she took me in and made me breakfast. And sometimes you can put little dumb references like that in your stuff.
Yeah, no, and that's what makes it fun too as a designer. I love the on the note too, the flavor text on the back of the miasma locations. I love all of them. They're just it sets it really cool. Yeah, a cool environment for it. All right, let's go on to this might sound wild, but I think this might be my second favorite scenario in the campaign.
This might be my favorite. I really love Death at Sundown.
I think it's stressful, it's fun, but I think for me, what I find to be the biggest success in the scenario design-wise is the Finn Edwards thing where you talked about. How there is so much power in your movement, and you can, like, take advantage of that to avoid this terrifying enemy. Not the lumbering candlejack, he's just a guy.
Somehow the set aside from the other one.
Look at that. They're here now.
What the?
There we go, we got them there. Here he is. That's so funny. The scariest guy, and then just lumbering
candlejack. Which, by the way, yes, it is a Freakazoid reference.
Oh, nice. And it is also, in all fairness, a tough enemy too. He's not nothing. But yeah, the first among many that shows up the last time. He's got the best upgrade for his keyword text, which is cannot be defeated. That seems like a pretty good upgrade to get.
Yep.
And then you get also the claw, the tendrils, which is so it's just, I love the dynamic of this one, how you're like moving through this tower and chasing, and like you can just have so much control about where you move and then where it chases you. It's just really nice. It's a really good, once again, very good map layout as well for this one.
And even if you draw those encounter cards that move it up closer to you, it might not get to attack you yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so like there's actually here, like 1 second too, where's the one card? So like the cannot make attacks opportunity, huge flavor text. Not flavor text, that's huge keyword text on that one. And then there's also this one, it's you or me.
That is possibly my favorite card in the whole campaign.
And I can see why. My first time playing it, I was like, this card is a beating. But really, all this card is take 1 damage, take 1 horror. Like, you move.
Yep.
But then it's really just deal someone, take 1 damage, take 1 horror. And
it's a card that feels terrifying.
Yeah, yeah.
But without actually losing you the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like at this point then also it can sometimes be even advantageous depending on how things are, right? Like how the situation
because that means you've split up the players so the tendrils has other targets it can search for.
Exactly.
So you can take advantage of pathing AI.
Yeah. Yeah, take advantage of that's really funny. Yeah, no, I really like this one. And then this one also has the biggest head scratcher, which is the victory display.
Yep.
Small.
And you will have the binding runes, the Rusted Blade and the Killing Birds.
Yeah, so my first time through on this one, it's really simple until the last act, which I think is like
Yep.
really good, right? Like once you come in here and you have to do things in the victory display. But I love this, and this is something that we talked about before, and even before this, how when you design, there were moments where you were like, what can I do that hasn't been done, or likely will never be done in the official game? I doubt they're ever going to do something like this in the actual game. And it's cool that in the custom scenario you can explore this. So where did this all come from?
So this was kind of another like solving a problem with a problem thing.
Yeah.
Where this was a mechanic I had in my backlog of like, wouldn't it be so cool if there was a scenario that this, which by the way, some of the other ones that are like, wouldn't it be so cool? Dead by Dawn was, what would it mean if an enemy had 0 health?
Okay, yeah.
The entire impetus for Dead by Dawn is, what if you put 0 in the enemy health box? What would that mean? That was the origin of the design of that scenario. But this one of my like, in my big document of like, what could you do something with this, was what if you like went into the victory display and fought things there? What if like the victory display is just another play area? What if it was treated as such? And at the same time, I had this problem of there's this scenario where you need to kill this unkillable monster.
Yeah.
It's beyond anything. It's like, but if I just make it really big, that's boring.
Yes, yeah.
It wouldn't feel big. Like, no matter how big I tuned that number, it wouldn't feel the way it's supposed to feel. It would feel, oh, I just have to punch something really hard. And so coming to the combo of like, how do you kill the unkillable? Kill it where it's already dead. Like, put it in the place where you put special things you've killed and kill it again.
Yeah.
Was like part of that. And then coming up with the like in thematic thing of the 3-part riddle of how you actually kill Dr. Elias Pickman.
Yeah.
Where, spoilers for people who are spoiler reading, he's unkillable because he cannot be defeated by damage.
Yeah.
But there's this card here called Killing Words that says take direct horror equal to an enemy at your location's remaining health, defeat that enemy. And so the entire intent is that you bring him down to like 0, keep him tapped with the binding runes potentially, and then just speak the killing words.
Yep.
And he explodes.
It tells such a good story here as well, because like you're in the memories, right? You've got the things. He's there, and yeah, you can't kill him the normal way because he's a memory, right? And
here's the thing: you probably will kill him with the Rusted Blade, but there's other options.
Yeah, the little things that you can also find while exploring this tower, which for me, I don't know why, but this one always just reminds me of like BioShock. And I don't exactly know why, because like there's no BioShock that takes place in a clock tower, but it just gives me these weird vibes, and every time I'm like, oh yeah, this is like the victory display BioShock one. So
I could definitely see Dr. Elias Pickman as a BioShock character.
Oh yeah, definitely.
He strikes me as that sort of "you will not stop me, you cannot stop me" does sound like an Andrew Ryan phrase.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great climax to the non-Arkham side of the story as well.
This one, by the way, is another Resident Evil reference.
Perfect. Incredible.
Because in every Resident Evil game, the final boss fight with the thing you've been tangoing with all game, they give you some giant weapon.
Yeah. And you just blast the hell out of it. I think I got in my recent run, I found these two, and they were a good time. I think I did shoot them with this thing, so it's only fitting.
Which the EXOL is sized perfectly to take out the tendrils in a single shot.
Yep.
Partially to encourage you, like, it's okay to just kill this thing sometimes.
Yes, yeah, it gives you some time,
It'll heal, but you get a lot of time by just shooting this thing.
Yes. I also love the story you have on these two cards where someone gets crushed in the frickin' clock gears. Like over here? Yeah.
This is also part of the whole so many people catch on, and this is fully intentional, that if you can get the tendrils to repeatedly end up at the clock chamber, it's going to take tick damage just for existing.
Yes, yeah.
And that's fully intended. That's like, yeah, good job. You found the, like, this is part of the joy of evading this enemy and figuring out how to work around him, is that you can trap him in a spot where he's taking damage over time.
And just keep crushing him, yeah. Sweet.
It also sets up the thing that these gears are crushing for the interlude that follows.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, and really quick, talking about the red text, I do want to mention this page.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this one, yeah.
I loved when I figured this out, when I was like, you know, there's nothing that says that I can't make a whole page that's just one don't read this.
Yeah. I remember when I saw this page, I didn't read it, I put my hand up, but my chat wanted to read it, so I just left it on the screen while I did my lunch break. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Because chat...
On the one hand, I wish I did different things for each box, but on the other hand, the whole point is that it's just like, you're gonna look at one of them.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
There's nowhere to look.
Yeah, it's just gonna happen.
Also, like, it's not that bad.
No, it's not. No, it's kind of more like
it swaps a -2 for like a -4.
Yeah. And it's more just kind of fun, right? It's like a...
it is a -5.
Oh, look at that.
It's a very powerful -5.
Yeah, your cultists, I remember in this one, they're
This was something I really wanted to tell you about.
Oh, yeah?
I remember repeatedly remarking on the cultists, and I think the first time you played this campaign, you won on a cultist.
Oh, so sick. Yeah. No, I love the cultist design.
The internal, I refer to cultists in this campaign as the humanity token.
Cool. Awesome. I love that.
It's harder to be humanity, but if you can manage it, it isn't without its rewards.
Yeah, and like I think it's a really nice design too, because the modifier is really high, but it has an if you succeed thing to it, right? Like looking at like for the hard side of Midnight Hour, the -6, but it's if you succeed. So like it's basically just kind of like the majority of the time an autofail, but then like especially on standard and easy, you can really pass a -4. Like that's what you're like prepping for on a very hard test, right? Like by the math of the game. I think that's really I think it's I love it. I love it. And the first thing I want to say for this last scenario here is I love the subtitle on each location. Where it's the heart of Arkham.
How it tells you what it's going to be?
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that is, it's really funny. It makes me laugh each time.
That was a fun thing, figuring out, being like, okay, so what's a word I can use that feels at least slightly natural?
Yes, yeah.
But then you flip it and you're like, oh god.
There's the eye, yeah, the eye of Balshandor. So this is another, I imagine this was another what if moment. Yep. So like what if the locations were the enemies? Talk about this one a bit. For this.
Yeah, so this was one of the first scenarios I knew the mechanics of.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted the campaign to end with you were literally fighting the city itself in the form of the Ancient One. Mm-hmm. It took a while to get there, and figuring out, okay, so what does that mean, was not a one-to-one path. But one of the things I'm most happy with is how this finale kind of blends together a bunch of your choices throughout the campaign.
Yeah.
A bunch of things happen based on what you've done. Which monster did you kill in scenario 6? Cool, the other one is here, and he's helpful?
Yes, which is so cool, yeah.
He's actually not, but, like, he's kind of helpful. Yeah. And maybe you even deal with him to get, like, the knowledge you seek. Or did you earn Grayson's respect and like do the right things with Grayson? Cool. The loyalists are here, and they're going to just kill locations on their own sometimes.
Yeah.
Like dealing 2 damage to each enemy at their location, they will straight up kill a miasma location if you leave them there long enough.
Yeah, yeah. And it's nice too, because as you also were saying, the solo balance, it just can like kill some of these guys too.
But one of my favorite things was I love doing something like this.
Yeah.
Where something is like, I'm sorry, is this supposed to be a challenge?
Yeah.
And then you understand why it's a challenge as the scenario progresses.
Yes, yeah.
Where this version of Balshandor, really easy to kill, but it's also the final version you kill because you're inside him and you can't damage him directly.
Yes, yeah.
Other stuff, the rallied locations. So originally these referenced, and a lot of these still do, reference like specific horror properties. The rally effects.
Okay.
So like Lucky Break is Fatal Frame.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, not Lucky Break. Sorry, Arkham Advertiser is Fatal Frame. Lucky Break is the Leprechaun series.
Okay, all right. I love it. I love it.
I love the text on Lucky Break. I love imagining this very serious man being like, "Let me be clear. This is not Leprechaun gold. I am not handing you a briefcase full of Leprechaun gold. Please bring it back when you're done."
That's great. That's good.
Even the cheeky thing of the River Docks referencing Labyrinth of Lunacy, because when
That's
you
where it
win
comes
Labyrinth
out
of
of,
Lunacy,
yeah.
you come out at the River Docks. The bit that actually that was the hardest part of it was actually the end part. It took me a while to settle on this bit where you're inside him.
Okay, yeah.
Because once again, the whole like defeating the locations led to an anticlimax where once you had like 5 or 6 of them defeated, clearly you were going to win the scenario.
Yeah, and you needed like a little punch at the end to give it that still not done and feel like I have a good conclusion that you didn't know was coming.
Finishing off Balshandor, a lot of people manage it pretty reasonably. It's not actually that hard, but it feels like the last moment, the last like, okay, it's me and the Ancient One in a bare knuckle boxing competition. Let's do this.
Yeah, because I remember it's in my blind playthrough. It was pretty easy, but it does feel like a good conclusion to the scenario, which is nice. Because if it was hard, it would be like when you get Nyarlathotep and you're like, okay, we're not gonna do this, right? Like when you get the secret Nyarlathotep. But with this one, you're like, all right, let's finish this guy off. Like it makes sense too because you've already been like weakening all the parts of him, right? Like there's still like the flavors that it's all still like the guy, right? But then you just go and finish the final version of him off. I think it's a nice finish to the whole campaign.
So this is a great lead-in to talk about the resolutions, because there's 2 things I want to talk about. Firstly, if you are defeated at that point, you still win.
Oh, really?
If you are defeated while you're inside Balshandor, where is it? It's this one. It's resolution 2.
Yeah. They're just killed, driven insane, killed, but they still win.
Once again, no rule that says a dog can't practice law.
Yeah, that's
that
true.
A dog can't fly an airplane. There's nothing that says you can't be killed multiple times.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially in the resolution text of a campaign.
Just killed over and over again. That's funny.
And it tells such a fun story, too.
Yes,
like, you're killed, and then you're killed again, and then you're killed some more.
Yeah, then you're driven insane because, and then you're killed, but you win the campaign, but then you're killed one more time.
Because this guy is angry.
Yeah.
And there's also this bit.
The resolution 0, yeah. Received a twisted gift. I don't even know about this one. Because I avoided that red
Yeah,
red text.
you should never read Resolution Zero. There's nothing that tells you to read it.
What does the
But
twisted
if you
gift
do,
do?
it's the end text, the epilogue text that like
Yeah.
you are trying to unbind him again.
Nice. Okay, I love that because it was like the whole one of my favorite things is in Path to Carcosa, where if you have a hidden card at the end and you get the secret "I'm doing the play again" ending, I love that.
The epilogues, I liked the idea of like, let's just tie up a few loose threads here and there.
Yeah.
Arkham Stands United is the one that's the most fun, where it's like, hey, this is like joyous. Injected a Cardinal Reagent is like revenge on Herbert West, and Herbert West Conquered Death is the most like, oh god, it's not over, is it?
Yeah.
And this one is the like, you shouldn't have read that red text.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you can receive a twisted gift way earlier in the campaign. That can happen if you crater in scenario 2.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
But it will automatically happen if you
read that. Neat. Sweet. Well, I really liked getting your insight into everything here. Sorry, one thing. I had a point I wanted to remember. One thing I just love about this scenario that'll probably make you laugh as well is just in a comment for when this video went live, someone just commented, "How do you evade a location?" And
It's a good question.
and it's a great question. Like, and it's exactly that, right? Like what you're saying. Like, there's nothing really saying we can't. But just that whole thing, like, wait, how do you evade a location? It made me laugh when I read it, so I wanted to share it.
It's pretty good.
But yeah, it was really cool getting your insight into all this. And I have 2 more questions before I close this video out. The first one is, do you have any tips or advice for other people who are want to design their own custom campaign?
The hardest part is not coming up with the ideas. The hardest part is not building it. The hardest part is finishing it.
Mm-hmm.
The final 10% takes you 90% of the time.
That is good to know because, yeah, it's definitely true.
It's not easy. It's worth doing. But either keep your expectations, keep your scope small, or be prepared to put in a lot of work.
Definitely. And then one last question. Are you working on any new campaigns or anything like that? Any new scenarios?
I am. Do you want me to load in some stuff? Do you want me to load in? I can give you the sort of like rundown on scenario 1.
Sure. Yeah. Give it. Yeah. Let's see.
It doesn't have quite as much fun stuff at the moment. Where did I put it? So the object is loading in, so it'll take a minute. But this is the first scenario of campaign 2 that I'm working on. It's called The Agony Tales.
That's a nice name.
The gist as such is that your investigators have read a book, a pulp magazine that they found in their home called The Agony Tales.
Uh-huh.
They're the protagonist of The Agony Tales.
All right.
It's a pulp horror magazine. It doesn't the stories that they are the protagonists of do not end well.
Okay.
And then they start coming true. And so, your investigators feel the need to team up together and with an old friend to do something about this, starting with finding that book. A copy of it, because the pulp magazine version has gone missing. But there is a copy, according to your friend, Ulysses Owen, A copy that can be found in the restricted section of the Orne Library.
All right. Okay.
Henry Armitage isn't going to let you just look at it, though. So you're going to have to break in.
You have to stage a break-in. Okay. All right.
The Agony Tales is going to be a 6-part campaign.
Nice. Yep.
I currently have 2 scenarios completed. I'm working on a third. And there's some fun stuff. It centers around a mechanic called Discover,
Okay.
which is insert an encounter card X cards deep into your own deck.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Spicy. Honestly, I love the elevator pitch of the story. I think it's the kind of stuff that I love in weird horror. So I'm intrigued and I'm very excited to play it, and I hope everyone who is watching this is also a little bit hyped about it.
Keep an eye on Mysterious Chanting, and you should be looking at Mysterious Chanting anyways, because there's really cool stuff there.
Hell yeah.
I always like to recommend, if you haven't played Dark Matter, if you haven't played Alice in Wonderland, Cyclopean Foundations, Asia's Unwound, Kaimonogatari, people are making really cool stuff all the time. Not all of it's going to be for you, but I promise you, much like Call of the Plaguebearer, it's not about one location that's perfect for everybody. But there is going to be a campaign there that's good for you.
Yeah, I can echo that as well. There's so much fantastic custom content out there, and especially on the campaign and scenario side, that you should check it out. I'll hopefully remember, because honestly, this video probably isn't going up until like June, maybe July. But I'll put a link to Mysterious Chanting in the description. If it's not there, yell at me in the comments, and I'll put it there. But thank you for joining me today for this. Thank you
very much.
Yeah. It was great learning about all this, and I'm very excited to, when the Agony Tales is done, to play it and then talk to you in the future about it again, because I think your perspectives on design for this are really cool, and I'm happy that we had the opportunity to talk about it and share it with people who are also interested in designing campaigns for this game.
Totally.
And with that, I'm going to say a huge thank you to everyone who's watching, to all of our patrons. Please consider liking and subscribing to the video. And if you're interested in supporting our channel and watching more Arkham content, you can also check out the Patreon. I currently have a run of the Call of the Plaguebearer there on the Patreon, so you can check that out. In the meantime, have a good one, and as always, GG's.